So now I want you to read some stories out loud to me. I'm going to give you the book, and when I tell you to begin, I want you to just start reading the story out loud. So I want you to read the story as carefully and as quickly as you can. And when you have finished, I'm going to ask you some questions about the story that you read. Okay? All right. So when I pull the paper away, you're going to start reading, all right? Go for it.
2 girls went to a farm for a visit. There were cows, pigs, ducks, and 5 hens. The girls gathered the eggs every morning. The farmer showed the girls how to milk a cow. One girl said, "The milk looks good, but it will be better after it's cold." Then the farmer showed them how to catch fish. They also helped the farmer pick the fat ears of corn. The farmer said, "Now you can see where we get our food."
Excellent. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you some questions about the story. So take it away now. Where does this story take place?
At a farm.
Name 2 animals in this story. Name only 2.
A cow and a pig.
What 2 things did the farmer show the girls how to do?
To fish and how to milk a cow.
How many hens are in the story?
5.
What 1 word was used to describe the corn?
Fat ears or ears.
Okay. 1 second. Okay. Next story. Are you ready?
A blue jay was perched on a limb looking for water. Having just flown a great distance, she was very thirsty. At that moment, she happened to spot a water jar on the ground, so she flew down and tried to get a drink from the jar. But there was so little water in the jar that she was unable to drink. Just as she felt that she would surely die of thirst, an idea struck her. The jay gathered a pile of stones and began dropping them in the jar. Little by little, the water rose, and at last the jay could drink her fill.
Perfect. Okay, some questions. What is the main idea of this story?
A blue jay had to get water, and she used the stones that she dropped in the jar to make the water rise so she can drink the water.
Good. What is the primary challenge in this story?
The water was really low in the jar, and she couldn't reach it.
What 1 word would you use to describe how the jay felt throughout most of the story?
Desperate.
How do you think the jay felt at the end of the story?
Relaxed and refreshed from all the water that she had.
Why couldn't the jay drink the water?
Because it was very low in the jar.
Excellent job, Mikey. Next story.
On an empty lot near the park, many people were hard at work. Several boys were cleaning off the lot. They picked up old boards, trash, and dry branches that covered the ground. Others cut the tall weeds and carried them away. Then all the girls raked the ground smooth. At last, a group of parents arrived. They put up some swings and a seesaw, and placed an old wooden boat beside a tree. Then they built a strong fence all around the lot. Now the children had a safe playground that everyone in the neighborhood had helped to make.
Why were the people proud at the end of the story?
Because they built a really safe and fun playground.
Good.
And everyone worked together to build it.
Who built the fence?
I think the girls.
Who helped by raking?
The boys. Or one of the boys.
What were the boys in this story doing?
They were trying to build a playground. They were helping out.
What 2 words were used to describe the boat in this story?
Old and and I think old and I'm not sure what the other word is.
Okay, that's okay. I'm doing great. Next story. You're probably going to get pretty far in this test because you're a really good reader. Okay? That's the only reason why it's going on for so long.
The era of the cowboy came to an end as a result of changes in the cattle business. When cows roamed the vast ranges of the Southwest, the herd could not be rounded up without skilled riders on horseback. But with the invention of barbed wire, great stretches of ranch land were fenced into smaller ranches. Then the roundup was no longer a major event, and cowboys became less important. The long trail drives to the north, in which the cowboy's skill at herding cattle was essential, also became a thing of the past. With the coming of the railroad, cattle could be shipped directly to the market.
The first sentence of this story gave a reason why the era of the cowboy had come to an end. What was the reason?
The reason was because of the cattle business.
What about it?
Like how technology advanced.
What did the story say was the route that the cattle were moving?
Northwest.
What did the story say was invented to limit great stretches of ranch land?
Barbed wire.
What did the story say triggered a more efficient means to get the cattle to their destination?
The railroad.
Why were the cattle driven on trails in this story?
To get them to the market faster. Many American farm workers have been aided by the efforts of a shy, patient man named Cesar Chavez. As a youth, Caesar traveled from one farm to another, picking crops as they ripened. Since his family had no permanent home, Caesar had attended 37 different schools by the time he reached the 7th grade. As he grew older, he became increasingly concerned about the poverty and suffering of the farm workers. He began speaking to groups of workers about their need for safer housing and better healthcare. He convinced the grape pickers in California to join together and strike for better pay and working conditions. A strong believer in nonviolence, he led many peaceful protests, marches, and organized the first successful farm workers union in the United States.
What 2 words were used to describe the man in the first sentence of the story?
Caring and poor, I think. I'm not sure.
Okay. What crop did the workers gather in this story?
I think corn.
According to the story, the main character's family had no what?
Had no permanent home.
What 2 things did the main character in this story tell the workers they needed?
Better pay and better working conditions.
How many schools did the main character attend by the time he was in 7th grade?
37.
Excellent. Moving along.
The gale's fury began to intensify as Winnie lugged the splintered rowboat onto the barren reef. Her younger brother had managed to stumble to shore through the churning surf, despite the gash on his leg and possibly a fractured wrist. His dim outline was huddled against a heap of debris above the waterline, the dismal remnant of another vessel that had met defeat near these treacherous shoals. With nightfall upon them, Winnie bent her energy toward devising a refuge from the approaching downpour. If she could conquer her fatigue and invert the battered hull, it would protect them until the storm had run its course. She knew that eventually they would be missed and no doubt sought by a run in its course. She knew that eventually she would be missed and no doubt sought by a patrol boat dispatched from the Coast Guard station in the vicinity. But Nat needed immediate treatment, and daybreak seemed an eternity away. Just then, a feeble beacon and muffled drone emerged from the darkness.
What is the name of the lady in this story?
I'm not sure.
Okay, that's all right. What does the word bent mean in this story?
She put all like that like she bent all of her energy into doing something, like she put all of her energy into doing that.
You got it. What 1 word would you use to describe the way the lady feels during her experience?
Pretty scared.
What does the lady intend to do with the boat?
She intends to fix it up and hopefully drive away on the island.
Why is the lady worried?
Because the Coast Guard may not be able to pick her up on the radar or on the CB.
Okay.
The entomologist had contemplated the hazards of working with this lethal strain of honeybee. Imported from Africa, these bees were high-strung and aggressive, quick to incite the entire colony when antagonized. Their excitability often provoked them to mass attacks that resulted in fatalities. Yet they produced extravagant quantities of honey, sometimes double that of their more docile European cousins. By crossing African queens with the local European drones, the entomologist planned to stimulate honey output. He had taken precautions to prevent catastrophes by locating the experimental hives in a sparsely populated area and erecting grids that curtailed the bees' range. But as the entomologist detached a grid for a routine check of his wards, he absent-mindedly crushed a stray worker. Intensely, the murmur from the hive was amplified. A few sentinels emerged, pelting against his veil in adamantium. Then the torrent broke. In a furor, the swarm converged on their keeper.
Okay. What explains the man's cautious behavior?
It was very poor. He lacked being cautious.
What is the experiment designed to do?
To get more honey from the honeybees.
Good. In this story, why did the insects become enraged?
Because when they were antagonized, they got enraged.
Good. According to the story, aggressive insects sometimes doubled
twice the honey.
Good. Where were the aggressive insects imported from?
Africa.
Nice job, Mike. You're doing great. A few more stories, okay? Hang in there. Getting tired? You're doing great. Like I said, you're only reading this much because you're a good reader. If you weren't, we'd have to stop early.
There are sundry definitions of jazz, all of them vague. Their vagueness seems imperative, however, if they are to accommodate the custom of jazz to appropriate everything in sight. This receptivity to sources derives from a dominant feature of jazz, improvisation.
Good.
The emphasis on improvising entails an openness to the entire legacy of diverse musical elements. Although formulating the content of jazz is not feasible, there is little difficulty in pinpointing the group that spawns the music. Jazz musicians have always constituted a subculture of music, a cultish but scarcely organized body of instrumentalists. who rarely manage to eke out a livelihood from their music. Until recently, they have been unschooled in their chosen music, except as they have imitated recordings of their musicians. Never accepted by academics, only partially accepted by the public, jazz musicians comprise a closed community in which innovation and experimentation are more valued than tradition.
Beautiful. Okay. What does the story state as to why jazz is difficult to define?
Because it's very vague, I think.
Okay. Why are jazz musicians probably less organized than other musicians?
Because jazz is very different from normal music.
According to the last sentence of the story, what two elements did jazz musicians value more than tradition?
I forgot.
It's okay. In the story, what one word described the dominant feature of jazz?
I'm not sure about that one either.
Okay. According to this story, what group has never accepted jazz?
The public.
So as we go on, the stories are going to get harder and longer. So that's why it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get some of these answers, okay? But you're doing great, trust me.
The queen was one of the potentates who attempted things that no reputable sovereign would have dared venture on, and achieved those in which none but the most intrepid could have succeeded. She consulted with very few upon any action of import, nor communicated any enterprise with more than those who were to have principal parts in the execution of it. Nor sooner than was absolutely necessary. What she once resolved, she would not be dissuaded from or endure any contradiction of her authority, but exhorted submission even from those who were not willing to yield it, except at the guillotine. Yet she seemed much afflicted by the demise of her counselor, Claypole, who conferred with her in his last hours. Although no one could catch the particulars, it was concluded that he repented of his pains to implement the queen's wishes and presented her worst actions to her for consideration. Although she never made the least show of remorse for any of her deeds, her countenance was much altered after his encounter.
Okay. What is the emphasis on in this story?
The Claypole, the supervisor. I'm not sure.
Okay. What was the queen's counselor's name?
Claypole.
Good. What one word would you use to describe the queen's actions in this story?
Unique.
Okay. What did the counselor probably tell the queen upon his death?
I'm not sure.
Okay. What does the story say about how the queen dealt with opposition to her wishes?
I'm not sure.
All right. Getting a little more tricky, right? We're still doing great. Almost done.
Certainly, Harriet had lately been cognizant of Mr. Weston's unnecessary cavalry, but she had construed it as an aberration of judgment or taste, as one proof among others that he had not always moved in the best circles, that with all his assiduous concerns for her, the account treatments of true gentility were wanting. But until now she had never surmised it to mean anything. His manner must have been equivocal, or she could not have been so beguiled. Contrary to her wont, she found these protestations importunate, and his proposal a breach of propriety. Of course he wanted to marry well, but to have the temerity to hope for anything but amicable tolerance from one so manifestly his supervisor proved that he only wanted to aggrandize himself. So she need not trouble herself to feel clemency. She was proving himself assuming, conceited, very full of his own claims, and with little heed for the feelings of others.
Okay. What did Mr. Weston do to cause Harriet to react as she did?
I'm not sure.
Okay. How did Harriet regard Mr. Weston's motives?
I'm not sure about that one.
Okay. How do you think the writer in this passage regards Mr. Weston?
A clever person.
Okay. What one word in this story was used to describe Mr. Weston's chivalry?
Imperative.
Okay. According to this story, why did Mr. Weston propose to Harriet?
Because he cared for others.
Okay. All right. Can't stop because you're doing too good. You're not stop. You're a very good reader, Mike, and you're really good at sounding out words. Okay.
While industry magnates saddled themselves with the onerous responsibility of ameliorating the wilderness on the town's periphery with decorous replicas of Italian villas, it must not be inferred that the requisites of the disenfranchised class were in any way slighted. Gargantuan housing developments sprang up on which by the exercise of remarkable sagacity and imagination quite a fantastic number of families were accommodated. Great was the anxiety lest the workers should feel too estranged from the sight or sound of the mills that were the scene of their idyllic labors, in order that the inhabitants might have the privilege of ruminating almost incessantly on the epitome of human technological triumph. Many of the edifices were thoughtfully constructed alongside the new thoroughfare, or even if there was a viaduct handy underneath it.
Okay. What is the tone of this story?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Where do the people work in this story?
In factories?
Okay. Which of the people's needs has been provided for in this story?
I'm not sure.
Okay. The homes in this story are described as replicas of what?
Of Italian villas?
Good. What one word was used in the second sentence of the story to describe the housing developments?
Italian?
Okay. It's gonna be a little bit longer, but I promise we're so close to being done, okay?
In the spacious expanse of Western territory, consequently, we perceive an abundant theater for hostile pretensions, without any arbitrator or common judge to interpose between the contending factions. To deduce from the past to the future, we shall have excellent ground to apprehend that the sword would occasionally be appealed to as the arbiter of their disagreements. The circumstances of the dissension between Connecticut and Pennsylvania respecting the terrain at Wyoming admonish us not to be sanguine in expecting a straightforward accommodation of such differences. The Articles of Confederation obliged the parties to submit the matter to the resolution of a federal judiciary. The submission was completed, and the court decided after careful contemplation and deliberation in favor of Pennsylvania, but Connecticut rendered entirely resigned to it, until by negotiation and management.
You skipped the line, but Connecticut. Start here, but Connecticut, and then goes
Rendered
on.
fervent indications of dissatisfaction with that determination, nor did she appear to be entirely resigned to it until by negotiation and management something like an equivalent was found for the grievance she supposed herself to have sustained. Nothing here said is intended to convey the slightest censure on the demeanor of that state. She no doubt sincerely considered herself to have been victimized by the pronouncement, and states like individuals acquiesce with enormous reluctance and determinations to their disadvantage.
Very good. Okay. What two states were arguing over the terrain of Wyoming?
Connecticut and Pennsylvania.
Very good, Mikey. Which state won its argument in court?
Connecticut.
In the last sentence, to what are states compared?
I'm not sure.
Okay. What rule of law was cited as obliging the states to submit the matter to the courts? If you need me to read the question again, I can.
Can you read it again?
Yeah. What rule of law was cited as obliging the states to submit the matter to the courts?
I'm not sure.
Okay. What do you think was the writer's attitude toward Connecticut at the end of the story?
Not that happy.
Good. Okay, 1 second. Okay. You are all finished, my friend, with this test. Excellent job, Mike.